Today, on the Locked On Blues podcast, the injury list for the St. Louis Blues continues to grow as Robert Bortuzzo finds himself on injured reserve, adding to the extremely extensive list of players that are going to be missing some serious amount of time. Despite that, the Blues are winners of 3 of their last 4 games and 4 of their last 6, including a 3-0 shutout victory in Minnesota in one of their more impressive wins of the season. We're going to be talking about all of that, Brandon Saad's hot play, tonight's game against the Calgary Flames, and more. Should be a fun episode. Make sure you stay tuned.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and your number one source for Blues content. I'm your host, as always, Josh Hyman. This is your first time tuning into the show. Thanks for checking it out. If you're listening to it, it is free and available on all podcast platforms. And if you're watching it, or if you want to watch it, it's completely free on YouTube as well at Locked On Blues. You can see my beautiful face as well as hearing my questionable takes on the Blues. Joking aside, though, thanks for making Locked On Blues part of your daily routine, making me part of your first listen. All that good stuff. The support lately has been good. And let's just jump into it. Got a lot to cover today. Starting things off, I just want to talk about the injuries that the Blues are facing. It has gotten to comical levels at this point in terms of injuries. So on injured reserve alone, which is long-term injuries, most recently Robert Bortuzzo, as well as Torrey Krug, Ryan O'Reilly, Vladimir Tarasenko, Logan Brown, Scott Perunovich, and Marco Scandella. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 roster players for the St. Louis Blues. And then not technically on injured reserve, but still potentially out long term is Nick Leddy. So for those of you that are good with math, that is 5 out of 8 top defensemen injured, which is more than 50%. You got Robert Bortuzzo, who would most likely be their third pairing defenseman, Torrey Krug, who would be their first or second pairing defenseman, Scott Perunovich and Marco Scandella, who would, slide into that middle two or bottom two defenseman, and then Nick Leddy as well. You still got Parayko healthy, you still got Falk healthy, you still got Mikkola healthy. But then, the rest of the defense is made up of, Kale Rosen, Dmitry Samurikov, who may or may not be in the lineup tonight. I actually haven't checked. But the defense is absolutely tattered right now. It is so Mikkola Parayko, Tyler Tucker and Justin Falk, Kale Rosen and Steven Santini. So, 3 out of those 6 defensemen, you would assume wouldn't be in this lineup at all, given fully healthy. Tucker and Santini are guys that I think are a little bit less proven than Kale Rosen. But that being said, that's a rough looking defense. Even Mikla up there on that first pairing, that isn't health wise. It's just, more roster construction. But I would say the Blues don't have a strong defensive pairing at all on paper looking at that group. But yet they've continued to have success. They've continued to win. And yeah, they've given up a lot of goals recently, 5 in their loss to Minnesota, 5 in their win to Toronto, 3 in their win against New Jersey, 5 in their loss to Montreal, but then 0 in their game at Minnesota. So it's sort of what I expected, or not expected, but suspected could be the case, where these injuries and I haven't even talked about the forwards yet, but the injuries to the defense and the forwards as well has provided a good opportunity for the Blues to sort of get a fire lit under them. And I think something that I was talking about a lot in the regular season, or before the regular season started, was that the team looks good on paper, but they kind of needed to have a little bit of extra effort, sort of be that team that overachieved. It wasn't like that 2019 team where they looked super good on paper. They looked like they were going to beat anyone in the NHL, et cetera, et cetera. The Blues definitely had some work to do. Needed to have that little extra effort, whatever. And it seems like they kind of did the opposite of that the first chunk of the season, not playing with a whole lot of effort, not playing with a whole lot of will to win, et cetera. And that was causing them to lose more games than I think that they deserve to lose. And now all of a sudden you got, you know, over half your defense on injured reserve, as well as two of your best forwards, your two best veteran forwards in Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko on injured reserve as well. And it seems like this team kind of took that as a challenge and said, you know what, we've been underachieving this year. Everyone expects us to struggle extremely with these new injuries. Let's go out and prove that we're capable of winning some games, and that goes directly against what I predicted. I expected the Blues to go on a losing streak and struggle immensely and have this sort of break their spirit. And I typically am not the most pessimistic fan, but in that instance, I was, and I'm so far. It's a limited sample size, but so far I'm getting definitely proved wrong, which is good. Big test tonight, obviously against the Calgary Flames, a team that always gives the Blues a hard time. Nazem Kadri's on that team, obviously, so it's going to be interesting to see how Binnington responds to that. But before I get into any of that, I want to tell you guys about our good friends over at betonline.net. Now, betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football, college bowl season, which actually just ended, NBA basketball, hockey. They've got it all over there at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts just like this one, you can find that at betonline as well. It's not just a sports betting website. They've got news, they've got podcasts, videos, everything to keep you up to date so you actually know what you're doing when you're putting your money down. They like to provide, helpful resources. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. I'll be right back with the second half of today's episode. All right. So before I move on to tonight's game against Calgary and sort of the current goings on, I do want to sort of wrap up this injury discussion. I only talked about the defense, and that is only a little more than half of the battle. But looking at injured forwards, right now, Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko are on injured reserve, at least for another month or so, both of them. Logan Brown recently added to injured reserve as well. So that's two centers and a top winger on injured reserve. And, I expected the offense to take a little bit of a hit with those guys going down. Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly hasn't quite had the offensive output this year that we would have expected from him. His assist numbers are way down. Tarasenko, I was had a very hot take that he would score 50 this year. Uh, Definitely not going to do that. I don't even know if he has 10 yet. But even with them sort of being a little bit underwhelming in terms of their offensive production, they still, draw a lot of attention, from opposing defenses, just making it harder to defend a whole line. When you have Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko out of the lineup, then your Jordan Kyrous and your Braden Shands and your Brandon Saad are going to get more attention on them because that's one less guy that they have to worry about. And it's sort of shown a little bit. I mean, they've scored a lot of goals lately. Besides, even in that Canadians loss, they scored 4 and lost. They've scored a lot of goals, but it's been sort of a carry job. Brandon Saad is playing maybe his best hockey ever as a member of the St. Louis Blues. He has scored, I want to say, like 6 goals in his last 7 games or something crazy like that. It seems like every single game it's just a guarantee that he's going to go out and score. And I think that's just the rest of his game catching up. I think he's been a very valuable asset for the Blues all season. He's been getting a lot of ice time, even when the goals and the points weren't there. He was getting a lot of ice time, and that's because of his defensive ability. He reminds me a lot of Jaden Schwartz in that way, that there would be times when Jaden Schwartz would go pretty cold offensively. He was a very streaky player, and when Schwartz would go cold, the rest of his game would still be there, but he wouldn't get appreciated as much. Brendan Saad is a great two-way player. He maybe is the hardest worker on the team in terms of defensive effort. He is maybe the best penalty killer on the team at the forward position, especially with Ryan O'Reilly out. He turned the penalty kill around. Saad missed a couple games with injury, and during that time, the penalty kill was atrocious, like hovering around 50%. Saad comes back, penalty kill is all of a sudden on fire, and he is a huge part of that. And I think, it was only a matter of time before his offense caught up. He's never been like a premier point getter, goal scorer in this league, but he's never been quite as poor offensively as he was during the first stretch of the season. I think he only had like 6 goals and a couple assists. He was like way down at the bottom of the pack on the team in scoring. And then all of a sudden, a switch flip for him, and he still has that strong defensive play. He still has that great effort in the defensive zone, and he's still getting those penalty kill minutes. But then all of a sudden, he's scoring a goal a game, pretty much, if not more. And they aren't just meaningless goals. He's getting huge goals. He got the first goal, eventually the game-winning goal in that Minnesota game on the power play. So he is affecting both ends of special teams. Um, in that Montreal loss, he got the first goal of the game as well. In the win against New Jersey, he ended up getting a huge goal in the third period to give the Blues the lead. Uh, Going back to the game against Toronto, in which they won in a shootout, he had the first goal of the game again, and then he had his second goal of the game later in the game. So he has just scored at big times. He's been the Blues' first goal scorer, and what was that, like 4 of their last 5 games, something like that. Um, he has been an absolute momentum setter for the Blues, sneakily one of their best players amongst this recent stretch. And I talked a lot about players needing to step up when it was announced that O'Reilly and Tarasenko would be out long term, and Brandon Saad has been the epitome of that. It started a little bit before those two went down, but ever since those guys have gone down, he has turned into our number one scoring option, and that includes a guy like Jordan Kyrou, who's having close to a career year from a goal scoring perspective. And Shen, who's had 2 goals last game as well, he's heating up a lot lately. Buchnevich, who's continued to have success throughout the season. It's been a good offense by committee display from the St. Louis Blues, and it's been led by Brandon Saad, but he is far from the only player to contribute to that. Now, I want to talk about tonight's game against Calgary. I think it's going to be a big test for the St. Louis Blues. Calgary is a team that's been underwhelming, I think, by their standards, just outside of a divisional playoff spot at 19, 14, and 8. Haven't been quite as good as they would like. Their acquisition of Jonathan Huberdeau, a lot of people, including myself at the time, said the Calgary Flames might have even won that trade because Huberdeau was such a good player, and he has struggled a lot this year. He's got 8 goals, 20 assists, 28 points. Um, Nazem Kadri has also struggled a little bit by his standards. Not by his standards, but by the standards he set with that big year in Colorado where he was up or over a point per game. He hasn't quite done that. Elias Lindholm was actually their leading scorer, followed by Tyler Toffoli, which I don't think a lot of people expected. Mackenzie Weegar, who they acquired in that trade as well, was touted as a good offensive defenseman, and he hasn't quite produced those numbers that the Flames fans would have liked, but they still find themselves hovering around 500. And every single time they've played the Blues in the last few years, I feel like it's always competitive. They play a very similar style of game. And plus, they got Nazem Kadri on it. I think it's going to be a playoff-esque atmosphere tonight. I think a lot of Blues fans and players really dislike Nazem Kadri after, obviously the incident with Justin Falk, where he laid a questionable hit and took Falk out of the playoffs. And then obviously the Jordan Binnington incident last year, where it wasn't so much a dirty play by Nazem Kadri, but his reputation precedes him. And it's like, you know what? Any other player, maybe you give them the benefit of the doubt, but Jordan Binnington playing the best hockey of his career, not including the cup run, obviously. The best hockey of his career against the best team in the NHL, giving the Blues a chance to win. And then all of a sudden, Nazem Kadri has a reckless play, not dirty, but reckless play that takes Binnington out for the series. There's a lot of bad blood between the Blues and Nazem Kadri, rightfully so, somewhat. Obviously there's stuff that happened with that whole thing that made both sides look really bad. Don't need to get into that. Talked about it plenty. But that being said, I think the emotions are going to be very high heading into the game tonight. I think the Blues really want to prove that they can continue to have success. I mean, the injury list, I have to scroll, to see the full list of players. That's very rare versus the Flames are pretty much fully healthy, minus Brett Ritchie and Oliver Killington. So Blues are undermanned. The Flames are underperforming. They have 2 games against each other in the next 3 days or so. Obviously, today, the 10th, and then on Thursday, they play as well. So almost like a mini playoff series for the 2 teams. And tonight, you really got to set the tone. Looking at the forward lines for tonight's game, Buchnevich, Thomas, and Kyrou. I like that line a lot. I love Thomas and Kyrou together, and Buchnevich on that left side is just the icing on the cake. And then Saad, Shen, and Barbashev has been the Blues' best line as of late, with Brendan Saad playing extremely well. Jake Neighbors on that third line with Achari and Walker. I don't love Nathan Walker's play this year. I think he's kind of overstayed his welcome. Teams have started to figure him out, and he's done more bad than good. But Achari and Neighbors, I love both of them. I love Achari this year. I hope the Blues resign him, and Jake Neighbors hasn't gotten quite as much play as maybe I initially expected. But now is a good opportunity for him. And then that fourth line, we don't even need to talk about it. Torpchenko, Alexandrov, Pitlick, got a few offensive opportunities here and there, but that's an AHL line at the end of the day. That's just the Blues injuries catching up to them. So hopefully the Blues can, improve on their defensive play and give Jordan Binnington an easy night tonight against the Flames, because that's what it's going to take. In this upcoming third and final segment, I'm going to be giving my pick for Locked On Player of the Game and talking about the keys for the Blues coming away with a victory. Before I get to that, I want to tell you guys about Athletic Greens and their product, AG1. Now, I'm not in college anymore, but when I was, it was really hard to have good meals and just have your typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was eating at weird times, never had time in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. But with AG1, it is really easy to get 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens, and it's just adding about 30 extra seconds to your filling up your water bottle in the morning. You just take a scoop of AG1, you put it in your water bottle, and then you got yourself not so much a meal, but a good nutritional supplement to have throughout the day. And there's a lot to like about AG1 besides just the product. They have great sustainability and values. Athletic Greens is a climate neutral certified company. In 2020, AG purchased carbon credits that support projects protecting old growth rainforests. For every purchase, they donate to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including the No Kid Hungry project here in the United States. In 2020 alone, AG donated over 1.2 million meals. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. Put it in your water bottle, take it with you, put it in your scoop of water in the morning, and just chug it right there. It doesn't matter. There's no need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. So head there right now to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And I'll be right back to close out today's episode. All right, so the Blues take on the Calgary Flames twice over their next two games, both at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central in St. Louis. Tall tests for sure. Now, there are a couple different avenues I could go with my locked on player of the game, and I'm going to walk you through my rationale. So the obvious choice would be Brandon Saad because he's been on fire lately. But I don't think that would be the best pick because I think I've come to expect that out of him. I'm not saying he's going to come out and score a goal every single game. He might not score tonight, whatever, but he sets the tone for the Blues. He does a very good job there. I think it'll be a little too easy picking him for my player of the game. The other obvious choice, I think, would be Jordan Binnington, given his history with Nazem Kadri and him playing with a chip on his shoulder, playing better, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would be a really obvious choice as well. But again, I think it's just a little too obvious. People would expect me to go down that road and pick him. Instead, I'm going to go for a guy that I haven't really given a whole lot of love this year. I talked about him a little bit on this podcast already, and that is Pavel Buchnevich. Pavel Buchnevich, for a season and a half now, has been arguably the most consistent offensive player for the St. Louis Blues. He doesn't go on cold streaks. He doesn't go on hot streaks. He just produces. Night in, night out, he'll have an assist. You'll check the score sheet. You're like, oh, I didn't even realize he had an assist. Or he'll get a goal, and he plays with a lot of emotion as well. And being that top line winger alongside the two young guys and Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, he is the de facto leader of that line. The most veteran forward on the top line of the team. He sort of has to set the tone offensively for the Blues, and defensively, I think there's only so much they can do with their limited roster options and in that. So it's really up to the offense to carry the weight, over these next few games, over these next few weeks, while the defense gets healthy. And Pavel Buchnevich, I think, is a really good trendsetter for that, a really underrated player on the St. Louis Blues. So that being said, he is my pick for locked on player of the game. Now, if I'm thinking score prediction, I'm thinking it's going to be, I think it's going to be not quite as high scoring as some of the last Blues games have been. Calgary doesn't have the most dominant offense in the league, but they do a very good job of suppressing shots. They allow the fourth least shots on goal per game out of everyone. So the Blues are going to have a tough time getting scoring opportunities, but when they do, I suspect they'll capitalize. I'm expecting another low scoring game. Let's go 3-1 Blues. I think Bennington has a good night tonight. I think with that whole Nazem Kadri thing, he has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove that he can win. Flames get a sneaky goal because they always do. It'll be tough for the Blues to pitch back-to-back shutouts. But that being said, my pick for the final score is 3-1. Emily, what's your pick? 2-0. 2-0 Blues?
Yeah.
All right, Emily, my lovely girlfriend, has predicted 2-0. I hope she's right. I would love to see another shutout. Not as many goals as my game, so not quite as fun. But hey, either result comes with a Blues win. I believe she beat me last time, but she kind of cheated. I said 4-2. She said 4-3, and the final score was like 5-3. So I don't know if I count that one. That being said, though, that is all the time I have for you guys on today's episode of the Locked On Blues podcast. Probably not going to be an episode tomorrow as I am heading into Boston for the evening, but back in action on Thursday for the second Calgary Flames game. Let's hope there is a win tonight. That way we have something good to talk about on the next episode. That being said, that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for tuning in, for listening, all that good stuff, for watching if you're on YouTube. You can find Locked On Blues podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. I don't know what the other ones are, but I know there's some out there, and this show is probably on there. You can find it on YouTube as well at Locked On Blues. You can hit that subscribe button. Getting close to 600 subscribers, on the road to 1 billion subscribers. It is a very long road, but technically we're on it. Yeah, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for tuning in. You can follow Locked On Blues on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Blues. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. Thank you all so much for listening, and as always, let's go Blues.